The cameras flashed the moment Donald Trump stepped onto the palace grounds. He walked straight toward the royal guard, crimson uniform, tall black bearskin hat, eyes fixed ahead. Trump extended his hand, smiling, confident, waiting. The guard didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't even look at him. Seconds passed. Trump lowered his hand, visibly annoyed. But the guard stayed frozen. No words, no reaction. Just centuries of protocol standing silently between ego and duty. That day, Trump didn't just get ignored. He got reminded of something far greater. If moments like this give you chills, hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? You're about to see why this silent guard became a global symbol of quiet strength. Officially, the visit wasn't political. Donald Trump had arrived in London under the banner of private business meetings and charitable appearances. But unofficially, everyone knew what this really was. A spotlight tour. He wasn't here to campaign. He was here to be seen, to remind the world that even without a title, he still drew cameras, headlines, and controversy. Buckingham Palace wasn't part of the original itinerary. But when a palace official extended a neutral invitation for a brief walkthrough of the outer ceremonial grounds, a gesture usually reserved for diplomats or dignitaries, Trump's team leapt at the opportunity. He wanted footage. He wanted photos. He wanted a moment. "This'll be good press," one aide said. "It'll be historic," Trump replied. Security was tight. A small media pool was allowed inside the perimeter. Royal staff were briefed. Guards were reminded, do not break protocol. Trump arrived in a motorcade of sleek black SUVs that glided to a stop just outside the gates. He stepped out alone first, intentional. Cameras snapped like gunfire. He adjusted his coat, glanced up at the sky, and walked forward with a confident swagger. He greeted the staff with nods, ignored the posted guidance, smiled broadly. And then he spotted the royal guard, standing tall, still as stone, the very image of British ceremonial tradition. Crimson tunic, white belt, medals gleaming, a polished rifle held vertically, face hidden behind the towering black bearskin hat. Trump slowed his stride. "He real?" he asked with a smirk. A few aides chuckled nervously. One staffer stepped forward. "Sir, the guards aren't permitted to interact." But Trump was already moving, veering off course, heading directly toward the soldier, like a man who had decided this was his stage now. Behind him, his team hesitated. Journalists shuffled forward, sensing something unscripted. "You're about to see history," Trump said under his breath, smiling. He'd done this before, shaking hands with troops, first responders, even foreign generals. He believed, perhaps genuinely, that these interactions made him seem presidential, strong, revered, but more than that, he believed no one could resist him. As he neared the guard, he slowed his steps to a calculated pace, lifted his right hand, held it out. A handshake. Simple. Universal. Dominant. The crowd behind the gates shifted, noticing what was happening. The guard did not. Trump waited. His hand remained suspended in the air. A full second, 2, 3. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Come on, shake my hand. It's just respect." Still, no reaction. The guard's eyes remained forward, locked on a point in the distance that didn't include the former president. Trump straightened up, glancing around as if expecting applause. Instead, silence. A young tourist in the crowd whispered, "I don't think he's allowed." Trump chuckled under his breath, but it wasn't the same kind of laugh as before, because in that moment, with 100 cameras pointed at him, Donald Trump was not in control. The handshake didn't happen. The image he came for never materialized, and the only person who looked presidential was the man who never moved. Warrant Officer Ewan Blake had stood post at Buckingham Palace hundreds of times, but that morning, something felt different. He didn't know who would walk past. He didn't ask, because it didn't matter. His duty was the same, whether it was a tourist or a king. Blake was 42 years old, 17 years of military service, 10 with the Coldstream Guards, decorated twice for operations overseas, steady, quiet, unshakable. Most people thought royal guards were just for show, stoic backdrops for Instagram photos. But What they didn't realize was how rigorous the training was, or how serious the job became when the uniform went on. Discipline wasn't a costume, it was a contract. Blake had signed that contract with sweat, blood, and silence. His fellow soldiers called him the Watchman. He had the kind of presence that made even new recruits stand straighter when he entered the room. Not because he barked orders, but because he didn't need to. He rarely spoke during breaks, never showed frustration on parade, and during inspections, his uniform looked like it belonged in a museum. There was a story among the younger guards, possibly exaggerated, that during a summer thunderstorm, Blake had stood a full shift without blinking as rain poured down his face. No flinch, no shift in weight, no break in eye contact. He hadn't done it for attention. In fact, when asked about it later, he'd simply said, "Orders didn't mention the weather." That morning, Blake was assigned to the south post near the main gates. High visibility, high scrutiny. Tourists packed the perimeter. Flashes popped constantly. He locked into his stance like clockwork, feet slightly apart, back straight, eyes forward. The rifle across his chest gleamed under the pale London sky. Every inch of his uniform had been checked twice before stepping out. He didn't feel the weight of the bearskin hat anymore. It was part of him. He registered the crowd shifting behind the gates, heard the faint hum of car engines. Someone important had arrived, but he didn't look, didn't need to, because his role wasn't to see the world, it was to represent something to it. Across the gravel, the convoy came into view. He didn't glance, didn't break posture, but inside, he recognized the signs. Security moving faster, press stepping into position. A higher profile figure was inbound. He felt, more than saw, the approach. Heavy steps, slower than the tourists, more assured. Then, the silence. A different kind of silence, the kind that says everyone's watching. And then, a hand entered the corner of his vision. Extended. Waiting. He knew the protocol. He knew who it was. But the orders hadn't changed. So, Warrant Officer Ewan Blake did the only thing a royal guard was trained to do. He did nothing. Not because he disrespected the man, but because he respected the uniform. To speak, to move, to respond. Those things were for civilians. But while on duty, he wasn't Ewan Blake. He was the crown. The man before him might have once held the nuclear codes, but Blake held something older, something even more powerful. The weight of 1,000 years of monarchy, discipline, and silence. He kept his eyes locked forward. The hand didn't go away. The air thickened. And still he stood. Stone. Steel. Stillness. Because in that moment, he wasn't ignoring a handshake. He was holding the line. Donald Trump held out his hand like he'd done 1,000 times before. Except this time, nothing happened. The royal guard didn't even glance. Trump's smile twitched. He widened it, forcefully now, and leaned a little closer, his voice just above a whisper. "Come on, soldier. Shake the hand of a president." No response, no flicker of recognition. The guard's jaw was locked, eyes unfocused on anything but the invisible horizon ahead. Trump held the pose longer than he should have, his hand extended like a spotlight in the center of a stage no one else agreed to perform on. Behind the barricades, dozens of tourists were now filming. Some laughed quietly, others looked around awkwardly, unsure if they were witnessing something historic or humiliating. One child whispered to his mother, "Why's he just standing there?" A palace attendant, off to the side, answered under her breath, "Because he's doing his job." Trump slowly lowered his hand. He glanced back toward his aides, searching for something. Validation, maybe, or a signal to pivot. But he wasn't done yet. He straightened up and tried a different approach, this time louder, performative. The cameras were still rolling. "You know who I am, right?" he said. "Donald J. Trump, 45th President of the United States." The guard didn't blink. Trump chuckled, but it was thinner now. "I've met kings who were more relaxed than you. Lighten up." The crowd didn't laugh. A reporter at the back lowered his camera and muttered, "This isn't going the way he thought?" The moment stretched, then cracked. Trump turned, his face tight, and took a single step back. That's when it happened. Another guard, stationed further up the post line, took one sharp stomp forward, the traditional warning step, a signal used only when someone was getting too close or out of line. It echoed like thunder on the stone. Trump paused mid-step, startled. The sound made the cameras snap again, faster now. But Warrant Officer Ewan Blake, the original guard, hadn't moved at all. Not a twitch, not a glance, not even the flick of an eyelash. And suddenly, what had started as a handshake attempt looked more like an intrusion, not into personal space, but into sacred space. Trump muttered something inaudible and turned fully away. He motioned to his staff without looking them in the eye. "Let's go." As he walked off, his pace was quicker, stiffer. The confident swagger was gone. Behind him, the Royal Guard remained exactly where he had been when Trump arrived, unmoved, unbothered, unshaken. The crowd, uncertain of what they'd just witnessed, slowly began to murmur, but no one booed, no one cheered, because everyone knew instinctively. They hadn't seen a protest. They'd seen a principle, a silent rejection not of the man, but of what the moment tried to become. And in that frozen handshake, never taken, a message rang louder than any press conference. This uniform doesn't move for power, it moves for duty. And that wasn't something Trump could shake. The footage hit the internet before Trump's motorcade even cleared the mall. A shaky phone video, 30 seconds long, titled, "Trump Tries to Shake Royal Guard's Hand, Gets Nothing Back." By lunchtime, it had over 2 million views. By evening, it was global. Clips aired on every major network. TikTok flooded with edits. Reaction videos popped up in multiple languages. Some showed the handshake attempt. Others replayed the warning stomp from the second guard. But all of them focused on one thing, the Royal Guard's stillness. No eye contact, no flinch, no reaction. And in that silence, people heard everything. On American talk shows, pundits argued. "He was just trying to be polite," one anchor said. Another shook her head. "You don't shake hands with symbols. That's not how it works." In the UK, former military officials spoke out quickly. "He did exactly what he was trained to do," said a retired major on BBC Newsnight. "He wasn't ignoring a man, he was honoring a post. That's the difference between service and spectacle." One veteran commented online, "As a former Royal Marine, let me say this. The Guard didn't fail to acknowledge Trump. Trump failed to understand the Guard." Even members of the U.S. Armed Forces chimed in. A viral tweet from a U.S. Navy chief read, "That Guard gave the highest form of respect. He upheld his duty, even under pressure. That's discipline." Meanwhile, Trump had his own take. At a press event 2 days later, he was asked about the incident. He smirked. "Didn't want to shake my hand? That's fine. I've met world leaders tougher than that statue. He was like a wax figure with a gun." The crowd laughed, but it felt forced. Even among his base, the moment didn't land the way he hoped. Because while Trump spoke, the image kept replaying, his hand outstretched, the Guard unblinking. The power dynamic reversed, and people didn't forget. Palace officials, true to tradition, made no comment. The Ministry of Defense released a simple statement. The household division is bound by protocol while on duty, and remains a symbol of the crown and constitution. Guardsmen do not engage with members of the public. They didn't need to say more. The silence was the message. And then came something unexpected. A letter posted anonymously on a military forum, signed only, "From one soldier to another. You reminded us what strength looks like when it's quiet. You showed the world that dignity doesn't need applause. You made every man and woman who ever wore the uniform stand a little straighter that day." The post was shared tens of thousands of times, and soon images of Warrant Officer Ewan Blake, unmoving, expressionless, standing his ground, became a kind of symbol, not of resistance, not of disrespect, but of something rarer, restraint. Because in a world full of noise, bravado, and performance, one soldier reminded us that some uniforms do not bow, some roles cannot be bought, and some traditions still hold the line, no matter who stands in front of them. The shift ended just past noon. Warrant Officer Ewan Blake stepped off post the same way he had hundreds of times before, without ceremony, without pause. He walked down the stone path that led to the inner courtyard, his boots leaving no trace behind. He didn't ask for feedback. No one gave it. The Guard does not discuss the Guard. That's the code. Inside the changing hall, he removed the bearskin hat with practiced precision, unbuckled his white belt, unclipped the ceremonial rifle. His movements were silent and exact, as if the uniform itself demanded respect in how it was put away. He sat for a moment. Not long, just enough. His fingers, calloused from years of service, traced the edge of his tunic collar before folding it neatly. He didn't check his phone. He didn't speak. He just sat there, still. Another guardsman walked by, young, sharp, maybe 22, nervous around Blake, like most of the juniors were, but today he hesitated before passing. "Sir," he said quietly. "That was him, wasn't it? Trump?" Blake didn't look up. He simply nodded once. "What was that like?" the young man asked. Blake stood, adjusting his undershirt sleeves. "Like any other shift?" The kid half smiled. "You didn't even flinch." Blake turned, met his eyes, and replied, "I wasn't there to react. I was there to stand." And just like that, he left the room. Later that week, Blake walked through St. James's Park in civilian clothes, dark jacket, worn boots, quiet presence. He blended in as he always had. Tourists passed him, completely unaware that they were walking by the man behind the moment. He didn't mind. That was the point. He bought a cup of tea from a vendor who didn't recognize him, sat alone on a bench facing the palace. Pigeons circled. A toddler dropped a toy nearby. He picked it up, handed it back gently, and nodded to the mother, who smiled in thanks. No cameras, no attention. Just a man with his thoughts. A notification buzzed on his phone. He ignored it. But later, when curiosity got the better of him, he checked. A photo. Not taken by press, not even clear. Just a frame pulled from a phone video. Blake standing rigid, Trump's hand outstretched beside him, unanswered. Below it, a caption. "Sometimes silence is the loudest answer." He stared at it for a long moment, then locked the phone and slipped it back in his pocket. Because Warrant Officer Ewan Blake didn't serve for cameras, applause, or headlines. He served to hold a line between performance and principle, between ego and duty, between the temporary and the timeless. And that day, when the world stopped for a moment at the palace gates, it wasn't because a president extended his hand. It was because a soldier chose not to move. Some moments don't need words, just duty. If you believe honor still matters, like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who respects quiet strength. And if you've ever witnessed a moment like this, tell us in the comments below. We read everyone.